Fantastic. I think we'll get going. And Rebecca, it's over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the first Future Finest event of 2021. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Thorley, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Future Finest steering group. So before we just hear from our amazing speakers today, I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time just to give you a quick update on behalf of the steering group. We wanted to start 2021 with a real focus on personal development and to keep you really motivated for the year ahead. I'm sure many New Year's resolutions have already fallen by the wayside, and for many of us, myself included, 2020 wasn't a year that I was able to really focus on my own personal development and what I needed to do to grow as a person, both professionally and individually. Many of us are at the stages of our careers now where we need to start taking responsibility for our personal development. And that might not necessarily mean developing professional skills anymore or passing exams. It may be more around honing softer skills and learning how to manage a team and how to become one of the leaders of the future, which is why we are the Future Finest. So it's likely that most of our events this year will still be virtual rather than face-to-face. So we just wanted to make sure that the events we're planning for the rest of the year are ones that you're going to find really useful, interesting, and be able to find time in your busy days to come along to them. So at the end of this event, we will be asking you for some feedback on what you want to see for the rest of 2021. We have got some poll questions already prepared, which we'll be asking you to vote on later. But if you do have any other ideas or something really specific that you'd like to see from us over the next 12 months, just drop a note to me in the chat or just contact me afterwards and we'll try our best to try and put that on for you. I also just wanted to mention, you may have seen the videos of me and my other co-chair, Pete Rossiter, doing our best impression of the BBC Breakfast team. To invite you to this event today, and that was on the Staffordshire Chamber social media channels. We both knew that it was going to be a great event today and we didn't want anyone to miss out and to make sure to see as many of you here as possible, and we've got some great numbers today, so hopefully that worked. So that none of you miss out on any future events, if you could just make sure that you're following the Staffordshire Chambers of Commerce on LinkedIn, and that will make sure that you won't miss out on anything, because we'll be posting all information about future events on there, as well as sending out the regular emails. And so on to the main event today. I'd like to start by thanking the West Midlands Reserve Forces for their support to help us put on this event today, as well as thanking our guest speakers for joining us and giving us some of their precious time. You'll see from the slide Laura's just put up there that we have 3 guests with us today. We've got Army Reservist Andy Johnstone, Captain David Gibson, and the Ice Maiden Major Sandy Hennis. After we've heard from all of our guests today, we'll be doing a question and answer session at the very end. So if you think of any questions that you want to ask throughout the presentations, if you just pop them in the chat function or the Q&A section, and we'll pick them up as they go along so we can get them asked at the end. Otherwise, you'll have the opportunity to raise your virtual hand on Zoom and you'll be able to ask your questions personally. We'll be able to unmute you at the very end if you did want to ask any specific questions too. So I will now pass you over to our first speaker, who, like I said, is Army Reservist Andy Johnstone. So Andy, over to you, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Hopefully people can see me for now, albeit it's not the best picture. That's as good as the face gets. So I'm a warrant officer first class within the military. I joined in 1988 as a private soldier from a sort of clouded background as a child. Served 26 years in close combat prior to moving across to the Army Recovery Capability, where I was the senior non-clinical training designer, designed courses in order to put the most injured soldiers that we have back together and their families in order to move forward. So what I want to do today is go through a model called hard facts, which, as Rebecca has said, you're at a portion of your life where you want to try and build and better yourselves. Well, this tool will help you to do a gap analysis against yourself, but equally, it will help you as team leaders to assess components of your team, and then you can move forward and you can build your people and you can build yourself. So next slide, please. So what we're looking at is the holistic components of our lives. Now, the life, if you look at the top left, so it is a maze. And at the minute, you could say that we're in the COVID maze. And where is the exit? Everybody keeps asking, what's the exit strategy? Well, sometimes we just have to be comfortable inside the maze because the exit may not be clear. Top right, I tend to look at life in snakes and ladders. You will be on a ladder, so you'll move from number 3 to number 16. And you think it's all shining bright, and then you'll hit 17 and you'll go back down the snake to number 4. There will always be setbacks, but the strongest people will either look for assistance or they will look to recover, and equally that will give them a ladder. If you look at the bottom left, that picture could be seen in 2 ways. Is that individual about to jump and end it? Or is that individual someone perhaps like myself who goes to the mountains to escape and to reflect and to get space? At the bottom right, the eye. So it's important that you look at your life and the way that it means to you. But equally, when you're working with other people, we need to try and assess the gaps through looking through their eyes. It's not about us, it's about them. But equally, it's not about the wider world, it's about you. Next slide, please. So in order to go forward and to maintain our performance, we need to look at different components. And I use the car as an analogy because we check the tires, the brakes, the oil, the engine, or we get somebody to check it for us. We then do minor services, major services, because we know that if we don't look after the component parts of that vehicle, then the vehicle will not perform at its optimum. And it's important what oil you put in, what brakes you use, who you allow access to your vehicle and to you, because if you had a non-qualified mechanic do a major service on your vehicle, then they may well cause more harm than good. And that's the same for you as a person. If you allow people to manipulate and to interfere with you, who are not qualified and who are not competent and who are not actually honourable, then they may do more damage than good. Next slide, please. So within the military, we were kind of, let's be honest, we were shamed in around 2010, 2011, because we were injuring people on operations and we didn't actually have a capability to help these people rebuild. So then the Army Recovery Capability was formed, and we needed a holistic tool in order to assess these people and to start how we would kind of rebuild or give these people the ability to rebuild themselves. The military looked at a lot of institutions, and the prison service had what's called hard facts. So we stole it, and we use that now, still to this day within the military, to assess both able-bodied, physically injured, mentally injured, society injured. And when I say society injuries, I'm thinking things like cancer, because soldiers and officers in the military, we get society illnesses the same as everybody else. So it's not all about people who've been blown up. It may be that their family is going through a difficult stage. But hard facts itself, we use to analyze each component of the foundation so that we can build a stronger foundation for them to move forward. Next slide, please. So as you can see in this slide, none of these attributes operate in isolation. They're all interwoven, and the stronger and the more interwoven they are, then the stronger the net supporting your life in the middle becomes. Next slide, please. So first of all, we talk about health. One of the most important attributes of your health is your sleep. I don't know if you've read the book, Why We Sleep. I would recommend either the audiobook or reading it, because if you don't understand why we sleep, then you won't understand the importance of it. And actually, you may well be operating on a 75% battery the majority of your life. Equally, diet is important. If you put sort of, the oil from the chip shop into a Formula One car, you wouldn't win the Grand Prix. So why do we put junk into our machine as a body and expect optimum performance? Stress. Now, I'll come on to stress further on, but stress is seen as the enemy. Well, actually, stress is not necessarily the enemy. It's about balance. Exercise. Hopefully, you will all agree that exercise and how we physically exercise ourselves, and equally how we mentally exercise ourselves, will maintain the performance and will deliver optimum as we go forward. Next slide, please. Accommodation. So yeah, this looks like a bit of a trash heap, but it's about what's normal for you and what works for you. But equally, there's simple things that you can do. Your brain can only deal with so much disruption and so much untidiness. And if you're operating from a tidy accommodation, then you will have more capability to deal with other disruption factors within your life. Accommodation as well. So we are at the minute, we're in COVID and we're kind of locked down. Not everybody has a garden. Some people live in a flat. Even opening the window of a flat can make all the difference, because it can expose you to nature, and perhaps you can maybe hear the birds outside. So it's about maximizing what is available from your accommodation. Next slide, please. Relocation. So I'm 48 years of age, and in my generation, to relocate was crazy. You know, I grew up in a small village in Scotland, and why would you leave the village? You know, they weren't far off the sort of flat Earth society, but fortunately, the younger generation, relocation is a valid option, and fortune favors the brave really on this. You can stay with the fish on the left and be 1/5, or you can take that leap of faith and you can make it into the bowl on the right, and you can be the sole purpose and the sole user of that water on the right. And often relocation will be disruptive for the short term, but definitely positive for the long term. Next slide, please. So drugs, alcohol, and stress itself. I'm not a clinician, I'm a soldier, but I would suggest that one of the most abused drugs within our nation is caffeine. We all operate, or a lot of us operate on caffeine. And we look at prescription drugs, and we look at illegal drugs, and we look at alcohol as the bad, but we don't necessarily think about all the different drugs or all the different stimulants that we're putting in our body. And we need to try and keep a balance on what we're actually putting in there. Stress itself. So If you were to say to an Olympic sprinter before the start of the race, are you stressed? They would say, no, I'm exhilarated. Well, the emotions and the way your body reacts to it are exactly the same. It's about balance. And if you haven't got stress, then you cannot achieve optimum performance. But also, if you apply too much stress, then you will break. So stress has to be used in balance, and stress has to be used and not allowed stress to use you. Next slide, please. Finance. So within our world, we spend a lot of time trying to earn money. And very often, we just spend what we've got. Now, I would encourage people to perhaps look for what they need, not necessarily what they want, because you can have a more balanced life if finance is not your motivation and finance is not your be all and end all. That's easy to say when you are in a comfortable situation, but debt management can occupy a lot of people's minds. So it's about being honest and not being necessarily driven by money, by being driven by the want to make a difference. But keep your finance in check, and that will allow you more space to deal with other components of your life. Next slide, please. This is the be all, the end all, as the military would say, this is the sniper on the battlefield. And attitude is the defining difference between success and failure. Only you control your attitude, and only your attitude can control your movement forward and your end state. But you can influence your attitude by little things. Simple things like if you draw a smiley face on your mirror that you look in every morning, then actually it's very difficult to look at a smiley face that you've drawn and not smile. And that can subconsciously influence your attitude. And acceptance of what you can't influence and you can't control will help you maintain a positive attitude. Next slide, please. Children, some of us have them. We've all been one. Family. We've all heard the old adage, you can choose your friends, but not your family. Families offer both positive and negative. But equally, some elements of family can be holding us back. So we need to be strong and we need to communicate. And children, I think more often than not now, children are seen as the center of a family. Whereas kind of when I was growing up, children were seen as part of the family. And I would encourage everybody to keep things in balance. And how you bring up children, on how you interact with children, will have lasting effects on them, but equally it can have lasting effects on you. Next slide, please. So the top left is a plea, really. If you stop learning, then you've started dying. We should always be looking to learn, and we should never be afraid to ask. Asking for assistance and asking for somebody to help you to learn is not an admittance of failure. It's an admittance that you want to improve. And we should always look in. Now we've got online learning, we've got interaction, and actually the majority of people within the world want other humans to improve. It's actually in our DNA. Normal people and the majority of people don't want other humans to fail. We want our humans beside us to succeed, but we have to be hungry to learn. And you have to be honest. I don't know that, so I will go and find out, rather than pretending that you know. Next slide, please. Supporting agencies. We need to be strong enough to hold our hand up to say, we need a hand. Mentoring. I have a fantastic, and I'm really privileged that I've got a fantastic group of mentors that help me out, and I can bounce ideas off. But I have a self-rule for me that for every person who I use as a mentor, I need to have at least double that amount of people that I am offering my mentorship to, because I want to make a difference for other people. And that's just a rule that I have for myself, and I've had it for about 10 years now. And I've got a lot of network of people who will come to me, because I don't think it's fair that I should go to others if I'm not willing to accept other people to come to me. And I would encourage you to have different, diverse mentors. Don't go to people who are necessarily going to agree with you. Go to people from another area of society, from another area of experience, from another gender, from another ethnicity, and you will get far greater advice and a far broader spectrum. Equally, in the bottom, you'll see there's groups for discussions in chats. Triangulate. You know, a lot of the stuff on the internet. Yeah, okay. If it's somebody's opinion, then that's fine. You don't have to take it all, but just have an open mind. Next slide, please. So, as it says there, only you can change your life. Now, you can't make somebody improve, but you can make it possible for somebody to improve, and you can help them, and you can be available to be helped. Next slide. So, in conclusion, then, that's a canter through the hard facts there. Now my government email address is there. If you want to ask questions or you want to kind of engage further, then please come to me. I am honest. If I don't know the answer, I will tell you, but I will probably give you a good hint and a good steer as to somebody or somewhere where you could get the answer. Because I think together we can all improve. That concludes my session for now, Rebecca. I think the Q&A is being done as a combined at the end.
Yes, thanks, Andy. Yeah, the Q&A will be combined at the end. So if you do have any questions that you want to ask, like I said, just bob them in the chat to the panelists, and we'll collect all them ready for the end, and we'll do it all together in one session. So now we're on to our second speaker, who is Captain David Gibson. If you want to unmute and share your video. Brilliant.
Yep. Very good. Can someone share my slides for me, please? I think we're going. Oh, there we go. Easy. So I'm Captain Dave Gibson, currently located at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in Victory College for my sins. I'll take you through this lecture, and then basically, I'm not going to lie, it's a bit of a shameless plug to a bit of recruitment, but also you as business owners or future leaders of the future, you will inevitably have people working for you who will join the Army Reserve. And it's just to give you an idea of what the Army Reserve is, what it can offer to you as an employer, and what it can offer to you if you choose to go down that route. Next slide, please. Sorry, that's who I am. That's my intro slide. Move on, please. Okay, so British Army. We are involved in 20 active operations in over 25 countries worldwide. They're classed as kinetic operations, so they range from peacekeeping to aggressive, kicking the door down, doing what we do best. It's contrary to belief, people don't know how heavily we are, how heavily involved we are in some locations, but we have there we've got obviously the more known ones, so Eastern Europe, so that's sort of the Ukraine type stuff. We've got Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, South Sudan. We also have people out in America, in Nevada. We've got people in Colombia. Cyprus is a big one. We as a unit are currently sending, I believe, 35 individuals to Cyprus as part of a contingent for the United Nations, which is part of a bigger British contingent of about 160 soldiers that goes on a rotational basis. So there's quite a lot that we are involved in at the moment. Next slide, please. So within the British Army, people don't know this, but there's over 200 roles. So there's a multitude of things that we do. So we do everything located in logistics, so supply, movement, intra-theatre movements, dangerous goods, all of that, right through to Apaches, helicopter gunships, medical capabilities, engineering capabilities, electrical, mechanical engineers for vehicles. There are so many roles, and all of those roles, I would suggest, have crossover into civilian street, whether that's through leadership, practical skills, skills that the Army will give you that transfer into civilian roles, or whatever it may be. But we are a large organisation that has a very wide variety of individuals. One of the more emerging things that's coming out at the minute is cyber. So we've got a lot of individuals who are joining to go work for GCHQ and places like that in order to develop our cyber network capabilities, or our cyber defence capabilities, should I say. Next slide, please. So what does the breakdown of that look like? So around 30% of the British Army is what is called combat arms, and about 70% is support arms. So combat arms would be what we call teeth arms, so infantry through to tanks and squadrons like that. And then you've got obviously air support, so Apache gunships and things like that. And then support roles can be anything from medical, logistics. We have lawyers, pharmacists, doctors. So very highly trained specialist individuals who join us as doctors or as pharmacists or as lawyers, and we do that both full-time and part-time, and you get those professional accreditations through the military after you're in, so you can use that for the CPD type stuff. Moving on, please. I saw something pop up in the chat. I'll look at the questions at the end. I do apologise, it won't work on my MOD system, so I'm currently using my phone, so I can't read the chat at the same time, so apologies for that. So what can the Army offer to you as an individual, or to the employees that you may send to us part-time, or that may join us part-time and ask for the odd bit of time away from work to do that? So we have quite a few things. So there's competitive pay. So basic soldiers start around 20,000, officers start around 32. Rising to captains, we're on about 45,000, going all the way up to six-figure salary for those in the top arches of the generalship. You can get subsidised food and accommodation, training, health, medical, dental, free fitness and gyms. So all of our locations have physical training instructors. We have gyms in those locations for you to go. Education, like I said, the courses that you do in the military have crossover to civilian street. And then you've got the leadership and the things around that. So it's a continuous learning environment. And everything you learn is transferable. And it's very big in the Army that there is continued development, and it is a career. Even if you join as a reservist or if you join as a regular, it is continuous, and there is always things to learn and always things to develop. And those leadership programs as officers transfer into civilian street, so you get accredited for civilian leadership quals that are paid for and funded entirely by the Army. What I would say is that the individuals that we tend to have aren't just sort of people who work in shops. We've got airline pilots that work for us. We've got doctors, lawyers, medical staff. So it's quite a wide variety, and it's the sort of thing where you make a family for life. I think next is a short video that just explains to you the best part about the Army, which is the adventure training. So if that can move forwards, we'll have a bit of play. Next slide, please. So everyone that you saw in every one of those videos was in the military. So they're either in the regular army or the Army Reserve, and they were all paid to do those events, and they can do that at any experience level. So the individuals in this skydiving photo, they are part of the Silver Stars, and they're going in at an entry level. This is the first time they've gone skydiving, and they are paid to do so. So that's a 2-week course. They get paid to do it, and it's funded entirely by the Army. We also have people competing at higher levels. So there's people from both the regulars and the reserves that represented the Britain in both the Rio Olympics and the London Olympics. So you can get through doing all of that. But this is probably one of the more promotable things that we do. And I know that Major Hennis will probably talk about it more because the Ice Maidens was along those lines. Next slide, please. So the British Army has always relied on the reserve component. So it's a photo from World War I. A large majority of those who went to World War I were actually reservists. And moving on, next slide, please. More recently, the sort of things that we're involved in are training. So obviously you do training for your core employment role, which is what this photo represents. You've got exercises. There can be 2-week camps that can do that per year. Next slide, please. And then operations within the UK. This was actually up Boomster about 2 or 3 years ago when there was a mass snow in the north. So the army was sent in order to clear the roads, in order to get NHS staff from their homes into hospitals. That was the army that provided that capability. And this is a photo of that. And a lot of reserves went on that, and they were stood up to go do that and help their country at home for a few days. Next slide, please. This was the Ebola response. So a number of reservists and a lot of reservists went onto this from all walks of life and all sorts of specializations. We had doctors, nurses, medical staff. We had infantry to guard the camps. We had RLC staff, which is what I work for, in order to do the logistics chains to and from the UK. And it's just an example of how we utilize some of our reserve staff for that. Moving on, please. This is an enduring operation for the UK, which is called Op Escalin. So a number of years back, for those of you that can remember, we had the oil issues where the farmers weren't letting the oil trucks come through because they went on strike and stuff like that. So if those people go on strike, the British government has dictated that the British Army will provide support for that. So we now have reservists who are trained to drive oil tankers. We provide them the licenses and all of the accreditation to do that, which then enables them to do that in civilian street, because it's a civilian license that is paid for entirely by the Army, so that if that ever happens again, the Army can step in and drive those trucks to keep the country running. Next slide, please. You'll all have seen the bridges, the dam, sorry, when that flooded out. They had reservists go in to help evacuate those individuals. And there was reservists from the RLC who loaded the underslung loads onto those Chinook helicopters. So there's another example within the UK where we utilised. Moving on, please. And this is the most recent one. So you'll see the Nightingale hospitals. We've had a number of reservists that have gone out during the coronavirus pandemic, and they've run MTU, so mobile testing units, or they've gone into Nightingale hospitals in order to provide support for the NHS staff and run those hospitals. So that's just a range of things that we can do and we can provide, and the skills that can carry over to civilian street if either you or any of your employees do choose to take that up. It's a commitment of 27 days a year that can be done in quarter and half days. Next slide, please. So this is just to show that we do community engagement. So that's an officer that was in our regiment, Captain Singh, doing some community engagement. And we have quite high BAME stats. We've got about 20% of our individuals in the regiment are from the BAME community. So we are open to all walks of life and all genders and all ethnicities. Moving on, please. So how does the Army engage with civilians? I'm conscious of the time, so I'll rip through this. So the RFCA and stuff like that, and the READ. So this is part of what we're doing here is engagement. We've got the Armed Forces Covenant. We've got employer recognition schemes and stuff like that that enable the military to interact with civilian life, let you know what we're about and try and recruit, but also let you know that the skills that we can offer individuals who do join to move over. Move in, please. Next slide, please. And this is the employer recognition scheme. So again, there's bronze, silver and gold. So that's something that if you look up, you can basically, if you are an employer, and I believe some of you in here will go on to run your own businesses in the future, you can offer capability, and that's just something that you can put in the window, and it shows that you support that individuals, but also that you receive that kickback from the army, that you get that training for your staff and that capability and that leadership training. And it's usually the leadership training is the thing that doesn't necessarily build in civilian industry, but we in the army are absolute experts in. And the leadership centre for the UK, as defined by the British government, is the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. Every officer in the British Army who passes out has to come to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. This is where you do your training. This is where you learn about leadership. This is where MPs come. It's where people come. This is the centre of it for the UK. And the easiest way to do that is to join in and see if you can become an officer, I suppose. But that's pretty much it for me, I think. If one last slide, I think, maybe. Yeah, and that's just people passing out from Sandhurst in their wands, which is how all the officers pass out. I've seen a few questions pop up in the chat, which I'll have a read through and I'll answer during the Q&A session at the end. But I think it's time for me to hand over to Major Hennis.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, David. So Laura's just put a quick note in the chat just to say if we have got any questions, just pop them in the Q&A function. So if you could just spend a few minutes just popping any questions that you've had so far for Andy or David, that'd be brilliant. And then, like I said, over to Major Sandy Hennis.
Can you hear me there?
Hear you fine and clear, Sandy, whenever you're ready.
Brilliant. I think I'm sharing my screen.
You are, yes.
And you've got the Ice Maiden picture there, have you? Brilliant. No, I don't think you have. There we go, let's try again. Brilliant, excellent, we'll try again. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm Major Sandy Hennis, and I am an Army reservist. I'm currently working with Regional Command, which is down in Aldershot, but working remotely. In fact, actually 3 years ago yesterday, I was very fortunate to be part of the Army's Ice Maiden team, which was the first all-female team to ski coast to coast across Antarctica using muscle power alone. So we had no additional help from kites or any mechanical vehicles. It was all purely our own legs that did it. I was part of a team of 6. There we go. We were all in the military, but we're all up there in our civilian clothing because although we're military, we are still just normal women. In the bottom right-hand corner is Nick Swetherwell. She's the expedition leader. She's an Army doctor, and it was so entirely her fault that I ended up in the coldest, most inhospitable continent on Earth. The remainder of the team then, in the middle at the bottom, we've got Jenny Stevenson. Since returning, actually, Jenny's gone on to pass the All Arms Commando course. So she's currently back out in Norway again doing the cold weather training. In the bottom left-hand corner, you've got Major Natalie Taylor. She's another Army doctor, and she's got a background in sort of endurance sports. So was pulled in alongside Nick's to help run this team. In the top right, you've got Zanna Baker with her training partner there. That's Ernie Shackleton. Wrong, that's Ernie, named after Ernest Shackleton, for those of you that know your polar history. In the middle at the top is Sophie Montagna. Sophie's the other reservist on the team, aside from me. She's since returning from Antarctica, she lives in London, and she's been headhunted by Parliament. So she works and heads up the all-party committee for the polar regions. So that's what came out of this expedition for her. And in the top left-hand corner, there's me. I joined the Army straight from school, actually, as a regular soldier in the Royal Signals and worked in communications. And after about 6 years, somebody saw some potential in me and suggested that I apply to go for commission. So I went to Sandhurst to our leadership training facility and came out the other side as an officer, once again, staying in communications with the Royal Signals. can't get my slides to work today. So why would I want to go and ski across Antarctica? You know, it's not at the top of everybody's bucket list, really, is it? And I have to admit, I knew nothing about Antarctica. I knew there was no polar bears. They're obviously all up north, but that was about it. But what I did do was I'd been out of the regular army for about 3 years at this point. I'd left the regular army just to find a new challenge, really, but stayed with the Army Reserves. And what I was doing was leading expeditions for schools groups. I was in South America, in Peru and Ecuador, with groups of young people. And I noticed with a lot of the groups that I was working with, the young women, they lacked a bit of confidence in themselves, especially in their physical abilities. And it wasn't because they weren't capable, they just had something deep inside them that's telling them that they couldn't do this. And I wanted to do something that reached out to these young women and said, actually, it doesn't matter, you know, where you've come from, what your background is, or what you think you know or don't know. We can go on and try anything and achieve anything. So it was with this mindset that somebody sent me the details of the expedition. And I thought, actually, why not? You know, what is the worst that can happen? Now, I certainly wasn't expecting that. This was one of our training expeditions out in Norway, and we had to throw ourselves into this frozen lake just so we could prove we could cope with the cold water and we could control ourselves. It's part of the Royal Marines cold weather training. It was actually -20 on that day, air temperature. So in my head, I was telling myself that the water wasn't frozen, so it had to be warmer than outside. And that was the only way that allowed me to jump in. And actually, it's a good way of training because in Antarctica, it's a desert, it's dry. I was never going to feel as cold and as miserable as I did wet getting out of that ice on that day. So we had 250 women apply to be part of this expedition, which was huge, actually, nothing like the organisers expected. But obviously not all 250 could go. But Nix and Nat didn't want it to be about the final 6. They wanted to provide as many women as possible with the skills and experiences that they could go on with themselves and lead other expeditions on their own. So we had 3 training expeditions in Norway, slowly shrinking the team down as part of a training and selection cycle. Now, this in itself makes things quite difficult. We were learning all of these skills. I'd never Nordic skied before, I'd only alpine skied, but some of the women that came with us had never had a pair of skis on in their life. So a lot to learn. And yet at the same time, we were being looked at and assessed and decided if we would make like one of these spots on the team. So it was quite a stressful time. It lasted for 2 years. And it was a really strange dynamic for team building because, you know, you're wanting to develop bonds with these teams, but at the same time you are competing against them. So I had to just sort of be myself really and just try and enjoy the whole journey through this training cycle. And by doing that, actually, I think I put myself in a better position to perform well and obviously be selected for the team, something which I just had not expected. So after the 2 years was up, we'd learnt all the skills that we needed, huge amounts of preparation, and we headed down to Antarctica, the coldest, highest and driest continent on Earth. Now, normally you just see as a little white bit across the bottom of an atlas there, but Antarctica is actually a huge landmass. We flew in to the little teepee you can see there from Chile, and that was our base camp. The idea was to spend 1 or 2 days there, sort out our kit and equipment, and then fly over to the start point at number 1 on the Leverett Glacier on the edge of the Rhone ice shelf. We would ski up, gaining altitude and onto the Antarctic plateau and ski into the South Pole at number 2 before turning left or heading north, whatever you want to think of it, and moving out to Thiel Mountains, where we get our second resupply, and then finishing at Hercules Inlet on the Ross Ice Shelf. 1,704 kilometres. If we put that in a bit more perspective, it's about skiing from round Birmingham way down to Rome in Italy. So a fair old trek. We arrived at base camp then, sorted our kit and equipment, and 2 days later went up to Flight Control Fred and said, we would like to go to the start point. And Flight Control Fred, who was sorted out all the internal flights on the continent, just shook his head and said, I'm sorry, ladies, the weather is horrific. We can't fly. You're stuck here. And you expect that. This is Antarctica after all. It was a bit frustrating, but we came back the next day, ready to go again. And Fred shook his head again. Once again, weather was holding us back. Now, 1 or 2 days you can kind of expect, frustrating as it was. We were mentally ready to go. We'd signed off social media and I'd left my phone in Chile. More importantly, I'd had my last shower in what was going to be about 3 months. So mentally we were prepared to go. But more importantly, we were on a time restriction. The Antarctic summer is only 3 months long. And at the end of that, the last plane leaves the continent as it goes down into 24 hours of darkness. And that would be our last chance for the expedition. We expected to take 75 days to complete our crossing, and we got held up at base camp for 15 days, hugely frustrating. And that meant that by the time we got to the start point, there was only 68 days before that final plane left. And we didn't think as we started that we would ever be able to even complete our expedition. So thankfully, after that 15-day delay, where we had to work really hard to motivate ourselves as a team, we finally got to the start point. It was absolutely beautiful. It was only -10, there was no wind, and there was a huge sense of relief within the team. We were finally on our way. We put in about 17 kilometres about that first day, all went smoothly, and we just thought, actually, Antarctica is going to be easy. And then this was day 2, and we realised actually maybe not quite so easy. That polk, the sledge you can see at the front there, that was my sledge. I was leading the team. I had been leading them for about an hour. The conditions were getting worse. And when I turned around and looked behind me, I couldn't see anyone. And it was absolutely terrifying. Thankfully, they appeared through the blizzard quite quickly. But the problem was that we had winds of about 60, 70 kilometers an hour that were just picking our sledges up and flipping them over. Now, my sledge weighed about 80 kilos when we set off, which was more than I weigh. So can you imagine how hard it is to stand up in these conditions? We had to make a decision very quickly, whether to stop and put the tents up or whether to try and carry on through the storm and potentially lose someone into the blizzard. Nix, as our leader, she normally has a very inclusive sort of leadership style down the very transformational end of the scale, and would make decisions by having discussions with the team and coming into that sort of agreement together. But this is one of those situations where you don't have time to make discussions and things like that. So Nix had to make the decision on her own and make it quickly. I remember her looking at me and just saying to me, you know, can we survive if we keep going in this? And my immediate answer was, no, I don't think we can. So we made the decision instantly to put the tents up. It was a battle and we nearly did rip the tent, but eventually we managed to get in there and get ourselves safe. And we ended up being pinned down for another 2 days with storms of winds of up to 100 kilometers an hour and some horrific temperatures. And we had to once again try and keep ourselves motivated when we were hugely frustrated and watching our expedition slip through our fingers. After 2 days, we were able to get on our way, and we were faced with the real Antarctica and the real cold. So that was down to -57 degrees centigrade, where your breath freezes instantly and you end up with, as you can see in the picture there, a beautiful snotsicle. we had to work together again. We had to know how each other of us functioned in these sort of temperatures, because I mean, I had to rely on my teammates a lot. When your fingers get too cold and you can't physically pull a glove on or open a zip, your teammates need to know where your spare gloves are, where the kit is in the polk, how you put certain things on. So we all needed to know that level of detail about each other to be able to protect ourselves. Now, Antarctica is super remote, so we had to have our own doctors with us. We had 2 in the team, and that was great. But we expected to be using them for major problems, major medical issues. What we didn't expect, because Antarctica is sterile, bacteria can't survive there, what we didn't expect was about a week in, I became incredibly ill with what I can only describe as man flu. Apparently not as bad as COVID, but at the time I felt particularly bad. And my body became really, really weak. I was struggling to pull the weight that I had with me. We were skiing for 10 hours a day, up a hill, pulling 80 kilos, and my body just couldn't do it. And I had to put my hand up and say to those people around me, say to my team, I need help, I can't do this. Now that's really difficult to do when you've trained for 2 years and this is all you want to do, but it was vital for my safety and for the safety of the team that I did that. Straight away, the team helped me out. They took the weight from my sled, shared it amongst themselves, and physically we were able to keep moving and keep gaining that ground. At that point though, I really started to struggle mentally with the thoughts of, you're letting everyone down, you've not trained hard enough. And I was really getting those negative voices telling me that, it was all my fault and you should have tried harder. Now I had to do a lot to pull myself back out of that. If you can let that carry on, you spiral downwards and it's not going to end well. So I was using a lot of coping strategies, such as, I call them my inner cheerleader. So on one side I had the negative voices and I had to make the positive voices louder and keep saying them so they would drown them out. I also broke the expedition down. I never thought about the end point because that was just too far for me to deal with. So I always thought about the next resupply point. But when I was this ill, I was focusing on the next rest stop, or sometimes even the next few steps. And that sort of pulled me back out of that mental downward spiral and brought me back up physically and mentally. And throughout this time, my team supported me because they knew me so well. They knew when I needed a hug or when I needed the next little bit of chocolate, or they knew when actually she just needs to be left alone to deal with this herself. And having that sort of support from the people around you really made a huge difference. So eventually we made it to the South Pole. Huge milestone for all of us. It's got massive significance historically. Only think of the likes of Scott and his team 100 years ago. He gave his life to stand at that point, and that wasn't lost on us at all. But we did have to stay focused on what our goal was. We had only done a third of our expedition at this point. We still had 1,200 kilometers left to ski. So we took on new food, new fuel, and I put on my first pair of clean pants in 26 days. And then we were on our way again. Now, after the pole, it became very monotonous. Antarctica is beautiful, but it is a flat white nothingness. And we were skiing in a line, one behind the other, for 10, 12 hours a day. And you're in your own headspace then for that time. And that can become quite difficult. We weren't having very many breaks. We would ski for 75 minutes and then have an 8-minute break. Any longer than that, and our body temperatures drop too much. So in that 8-minute break, you're eating as much as possible, you're taking on drinks, you go into the toilet if you need it. So there's not really a huge amount of time to chat with your teammates. And so you can start to think things over and things grow out of proportion. And with no other distractions, the little tiniest things become absolutely huge. We started to have a bit of conflict within the team. Most noticeably about the pacing that we were going each day. Now we had team meetings every evening. Well, this was so we could discuss things that had happened during the day, and we could look each other in the eye, take the goggles off and all the warm kit, and be able to talk to each other properly. And we found this helped to take these little things that were going out of proportion and be able to clear them up quickly. We had to have a rule of complete openness and honesty, and that sort of thing really helped us. We did have one particularly big team meeting at Field Mountains when we were having problems with this pacing issue. And we had to say, everybody has to open up and be truthful about their goals for the rest of the expedition. And it was surprising how some of the team were thinking. One of the girls had a dream of getting to the South Pole, and now she'd achieved it. She just wanted to get home, so was really pushing the pace for that reason. We had another member of the team that knew there was a male team that had done the same leg we were on now, but the opposite direction the year before. And she wanted to beat their time. She had no idea how quickly they'd done it, but figured if we just went straight out as hard as possible, then we were bound to beat it. So we had to really open up and be truthful about these. And actually we had one person that said that we couldn't achieve our goal, her goal. It wasn't achievable by our team, so she wouldn't tell us what it was. And that was quite difficult for the rest of us to deal with. We felt like she wasn't being totally inclusive within the team. But actually, because we were all driving in the same way, and because we were able to discuss this quite openly, that little bit of negativity didn't pull down the rest of the team. And we found that discussing the problem cleared everything up, and we could reconsolidate, and we were able to continue the rest of our journey and finish across the line in 60 days, 15 hours and 46 minutes. Now, that was a full 14 days faster than we'd expected. We became the first all-female team to ski coast to coast across Antarctica using just our muscle power. But we also got a couple of other records. We are the largest team of any gender to have skied across the continent. And that's quite impressive when you think about the team dynamic issues as you get to larger teams. And 6 is actually a really big polar team. And we're also the first team of novices to ski across the continent. Everybody else that's skied across, and let's face it, there's not exactly a huge amount of them, but everybody else has been to the North or the South Pole before. They already have that polar experience, and we had none of it. But what we did do was we trained as a team, we worked together, we practiced everything, and we absorbed all the knowledge that we made sure we would be there and ready to go by the end. So I want to leave you with just one little last thought about how did we manage to be, as a team of complete novices, so successful. And I've put it down to 3 things. The first thing was a huge amount of preparation, research, practice, everything that we could do to make sure we were 100% ready. The next thing is both flexible leadership and fellowship. So within our team, Nix, as the leader, had a particular leadership style, that very sort of inclusive, collaborative style. But when she needed to, she was able to go right back to the other side and be almost dictatorial in that this is how the decision's being made, we're going on this. And you need to have that sort of flexibility to be able to function in this sort of environment. And the final one, I think, is really, really knowing your team. We, in the words of one of the team members, we did so well because we'd suffered every indignity together, and we certainly had. We knew each other in ways that people should never know each other, but being able to have that level of detail and knowledge of each other meant that we were able to support each other through the difficult times. So thank you very much. I'll hand you back over.
Sandy, thank you so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I can see that we're slightly running out of time. So what I'm going to do is, if I could ask all 3 speakers to just pop their cameras on, that would be absolutely fantastic, just so we can get through the Q&A as quickly as possible. So let's start with some of the questions, and hopefully we can get through them. So Sandy, one for you. I can see the photos and pick in the background. How do you feel when you look back at all that you've achieved? Did you hear that question, Sandy? Hopefully you did.
Yeah, sorry, I just had my mouse on another screen and couldn't get you off mute, sorry. Sometimes I say, especially it's 3 years on yesterday, and I had a long chat with the girls yesterday. And sometimes I look back and I find it unbelievable that we actually achieved what we did. But yeah, I think there's a huge amount of pride, and it's made me realise that you can do these sorts of things. You know, you don't have to be superhuman. If you believe in it and you want it enough, you can go out and reach those dreams. And I look now at things that in the past that I'd have gone, oh, I'm not sure if I could do that. I just now say, well, why not? Just give it all a go. So yeah, there's a huge amount of pride when I look back, but definitely not resting on my laurels. And there's always more things to keep us going.
Oh, fantastic, Sandy. Thank you. David, is there a way you can get a taster of the reserves before joining, such as days to come, and see what it's all about?
Yeah, so I've just put in the chat, I've just put an email address, which is 159 Recruiting. So you can go down, if you email them, they'll arrange for you to go in. You can do it a Wednesday evening, and they'll be able to give you in more detail what it's about. As a civilian, you can start doing some training exercises with the regiment. Once you attest, so you can go in, you can start going on proper training weekends, and you can start doing adventurous training and stuff like that. But it's a volunteer organisation. So if you join, you can leave with 0 notice. There's no notice period. You can just leave whenever you want. So my advice would be, if you just go down and talk to them, if it's something you're interested in, you can sign up. There's 0 commitment at all, ever. Even when you complete your training, it's a completely volunteer organisation, and you can just drop in at a moment's notice.
Fantastic. And Andy, one for you. Do you apply the Hard Facts acronym to your own life as well as helping others? And also, when you left the village life, did you find it difficult to adapt?
Yeah, so I do use Hard Facts on myself. It's more difficult. What I tend to do is do it in collaboration with somebody else. So my wife and I use it, and she takes great delight in analysing me, and likewise. But we work together on it. So I do use it. Was it difficult to leave the village? I was a bit of a maniac as a child. So the police station was very pleased when I left, let's just say. But I went off to London and then down to Pirbright. But confidence wasn't an issue when I was a child. I was overconfident, if anything. So actually leaving the village was not a problem for me. It was more of a problem for the army to slap me into shape, which they actually did really well.
Good to hear, Andy. I'm sure the village will be pleased to see you now, though. Sandy, one for you. Are you satisfied that you've succeeded in what looks like an incredible but extremely dangerous task, or would you do it all again, or something of a similar challenge?
I would definitely do it again in a heartbeat. Antarctica is an incredibly special place, and I feel very fortunate to have been down there and seen it. So yeah, in a heartbeat, I'd go back. Yes, I did push myself, and it was a challenge. And you do think, well, surely that's enough. But you find when you do these sorts of things, you have a taster for something. And at the time, as I got towards the end, I looked back at a video the other day, and I can hear it in my voice. I'm shattered, I'm fatigued. And the inside of my mouth had ulcers, you know, bits on my hands weren't healing properly because I was so fatigued. But yet you kind of forget that. And you just think, well, actually, you know, I survived this. What else can we do? When we got back in the summer, I went and climbed Mont Blanc with my boyfriend, now my husband, and one of the other girls and their partners, to push ourselves that little bit further. And I've since been skiing in the Canadian Arctic and Baffin Island. So yeah, always more and more things. But I think I'm going to have to rein myself in a little bit and say that there's other things to test yourself with, and they don't all have to be physical. And I'm sure my parents will appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, that's great to hear. David, just another one for yourself. What do you personally get out of your role, and what's your favourite part of being in the military?
So the cliche that people always have is camaraderie. It always comes out because it's always true. For myself, I joined the army when I was younger. I did HERIC, so I went to Afghanistan, left, went to university, did a master's degree in pharmacy, and I worked as a pharmacist for a year. To be honest, I looked down the barrel of a career that was working for the same company for the next 20, 30, 40 years, doing the same thing day in, day out, waiting to save that money to go on that 2-3 week holiday at the end of the year. And that was my life cycle that I was looking down. So I rejoined the military, and since I've rejoined, I've managed to go to Iraq, Kuwait, Afghanistan, Syria, Oman, Falkland Islands. I've just got a call from my desk officer this afternoon saying that I'm likely to get 2 years in Nuki in Nepal. So it's the travel, the people that you meet. I've worked for the Americans before. I've worked for the State Department. I've spoken to the Secretary of Defense. I've spoken to POTUS. So the things that you get to do, the things that you get to see, and seeing behind that curtain. So the whole Shamima Begum thing, when that came out, I was in Syria, so I know what happened. And you get all those secret elements that you wouldn't otherwise get in civilian street. So it offers you a different perspective on the world. If you decided to leave in the future, you could take that with you. But for me, I like the travel and just seeing behind the curtain of how the world actually works, which you can do in the reserves as well. I know that our elements that are going out to Cyprus to work for the United Nations, they're there for the buffer zone between the Turkish and the Cypriot forces, and they will be in a buffer zone that has not been touched since 1974. So it's like going into a ghost town. So if you watch The Walking Dead, it's a bit like that. There's cars from 1974. You go into people's wardrobes, because I've been there, and they've still got their clothes hung up. They've still got their wedding photos, because they got, I think, 8 hours notice to move. So they left everything there, told they'd be going back in a few days. And then that has been controlled by the United Nations, by the British forces since 1974. So it's like stepping into a portal, like a time hole. And you will never see anything like that unless you join the military. It's the only place you'll ever experience something like that.
Wow, that's amazing. Another question for you, Sandy. What was your personal hardest challenge of the trip, and how did you overcome it? And what is your personal highlight of the trip as well?
Wow. I think the hardest thing on the trip, on the journey, was when I was ill and having to ask for help. But actually, I think that the harder bit, and that was before we actually went, one of the bits of training we had to do was a crevasse rescue training, where you have to throw yourself into these big cracks in the ice and just be attached to a rope, and your teammates catch you and then haul you back out again, which is absolutely terrifying. And I really struggled with this. And I remember sitting on the edge and breaking down, pretty much crying, and then being embarrassed by showing my weaknesses to the rest of my team. And I just felt like such a failure at that point. And actually, the girls said to me that exposing myself like that, and you know, my raw soul, I suppose, actually made me a lot more human to them, and they could connect to me, and that really helped. And it also meant that by the time we got to that place where I was ill, they understood me and they knew me, and I no longer felt as embarrassed by that weakness, because they'd already seen that and they'd already accepted me with that. So there was no judgment there. So the hardest bit was actually that bit beforehand, getting past that being able to expose my weakness. The highlight of the trip, it sounds ridiculous. We had one little bit that was slightly downhill, and the sledges slipped past us and started flying down the hill. And we just sat on the sledges and just let them whiz us down the hill without a care in the world. And for once, it was that one little bit of respite. It was near the end. You know, we'd had almost 2 months of monotonous skiing every single day, and suddenly it was like being a kid on a sledge, and it was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, minor little things, but it was the fun that we had that day as a team that was really my highlight.
Brilliant, Sandy, thank you. And I'm going to try and get through as many of these. We have got quite a lot of questions, so let's try and see if we can get as many done as possible. So Andy, just one for you. How can you start to build more self-discipline to help with balance across the hard facts, and anything that the Army can do to help build this in your soldiers?
Yeah, so the hard facts is the analysis tool. Where it comes into real value is you need to set SMART goals. And then once you've set SMART goals, you need to share those goals, because if you tell your SMART goal to somebody else, then if you don't achieve it, you're not only letting yourself down, but you're letting the others down as well. And where the Army does this is we firmly believe in maximising people's talents. And we use hard facts and we use other analysis tools for that. So it'll be agreed with the individual and their line manager and their friends and part of the team to just agree those SMART goals and move forward together. And that involves a team discipline as well as self-discipline.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. David, just another one for you. From your experiences, what advice would you give to business leaders and their employers who are struggling with the current challenging situations? Sorry.
Yeah. So I think you could talk about this for hours, but the parts that stuck to me, having worked in civilian street before and stuff like that, are engagement with staff. So obviously it's difficult, those new working environments of working at home, understanding that, humor in adversity and resilience. So developing that resilience in your business and developing that capability to have that resilience. If you only have 5 staff and you need all 5 staff to operate, that's not a model that could potentially work. But the things I've written down for individuals really, and for you as a business leader, would be it's always about progression, training and development. You may have an individual who's very good at what he does, but he's not going to sit there and do that for the next 30 years. Eventually he's going to get bored. You need to have a development plan for him. Where you're going to put him? How is he going to develop? How are you going to keep him engaged? How are you going to keep him progressing forward? And the thing that does that is development and training. And if you have those people who are resistant to do it, they're the sort of people that you might want to be cutting off. They might be doing that job, but eventually after 5-10 years of doing that, they're going to move on. They're going to get bored of doing it, and do it today, not tomorrow. So for myself, it's language training. I can be in the evenings rather than playing on my PlayStation, which is something I spend far too much time doing. I've come to Sandhurst now, so I've not bought it with me. I've bought my language books. I'm going to work on my French so that I can do my next posting in France or my Nepalese, so that when I go to Nepal, I can start engaging with the Gurkhali and the Gurkhas. So there's always something you can do to develop yourself, and I think that's the key to it.
Brilliant, thank you. Great advice, actually. Sandy, just another question for you. You obviously put yourself out of your comfort zone. Is this something you would try and encourage everyone to do? And how do you get the confidence to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, include the next question as well from Ellie Willips.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, that's fine.
Have you always had the motivation and determination to challenge yourself and do incredible things, or is it something you've got a taste of, started small and never looked back? Because the two tie in together really. And the short answer is yes, push yourself out of your comfort zone, because it's all about growth. We don't start off being capable and able to deal with absolutely everything, and it's the same pushing yourself in these sort of environments. And I started off being introduced to climbing and to skiing with the army. I've built up through different things each time, doing the next course, going on the next trip, and pushing myself further and further. And you find that as you push that comfort zone, if you don't push it too far and completely pile back in again, if you just push it a little bit, you gain so much from that. In whatever you push yourself in, and it works in different areas of your life. If you push yourself, say in a physical bit on a climb, pushing yourself on a harder climb, then you find you suddenly have confidence that you can transfer across and be able to feel more confident doing public speaking or something like that. So it all interlinks. So yeah, I started small. I did my basic level of climbing, my basic level of skiing, and I built up, and the army has provided me with all these courses and all this experience, and I'm now a climbing instructor, a kayaking instructor, a mountain bike instructor, a ski instructor, and an alpine climbing instructor. You know, all of this stuff that I started from nothing and just built up. And when you look at the start and you think, oh, I'll never be that person, well, you are if you take the steps bit by bit to get up there.
Wonderful, fantastic. So that's, I think I've hit all of the questions in the Q&A. I know some of them were already answered by the speakers. I just want to check in the chat if I'm missing any of the questions in there. Okay, bear with me. So question for you, David. If you are interested in the reserves, what amount of time do you recommend committing? I.e., do you have many people doing this alongside at their full-time occupation?
Yeah, so there's very few people that work for us that don't have civilian employment. The sort of people we try to recruit are those that bring other other capabilities to the army. So, for example, I had reservists, albeit from America, but it's the same principle, who came to Syria. So that when we designed the prisons for the Syrians, they were prison guards. We as the army don't have that capability, so I can logistically build one, I can design one, and I can implement that building. But then we'll get civilians to come over and do that sort of thing, and they're reservists. So the vast majority do. In terms of commitment, I think around it's 27 days a year. If there's 1 year that you can't commit that, there's no comeback. If you do hit your 27 days a year commitment, you get a tax-free bounty bonus that increases year on year, and I think it goes up to about £1,500 tax-free in a calendar year. Of those 27 days, 14 of them need to be in a continuous block. So you go away for a 2-week camp. I think we did one in 2019 in Cyprus. I've seen them done in Brunei. Equally, I've seen them done in England, Scotland, and Wales. So they go all over and do them all over the place. Those other 13 days that are remaining can be done on a weekend, which would be 2.5 days, coming in on a Friday night. That's a half day. And then a Saturday, Sunday, leaving the Sunday, probably about 1,700 hours. On the Sunday, that'd be 2.5 days, or a Wednesday evening, which would be a quarter day. So it's broken up throughout the year, really, as to how that's done.
Thank you very much for that, David. Andy, just a question for you, and then I think we've got one for Sandy, and then I think we're done with all the questions. So Andy, how do you identify and stop those people who interfere with your life and give you bad advice or negative that give you bad advice? In our careers, we are seen as experts, so it's sometimes difficult to admit when you don't know something. Will this make us look less professional?
Yeah, so in answer to the first part then, I triangulate what people give me as advice, because that may be their opinion. And I think I try and get more than one opinion on each subject. And that's why I think it's important to have a lot of diversity with your mentors, so that people come from different portions of society, different experience, and they can give you a different opinion. But equally, you will very quickly work out who the idiots are. And you know, the old adage, if you go in the room and you can't see who the idiot is, it's you. Well, I would encourage you to just identify, and you can build up trust. But equally, some of the people that helped me were recommended to me, and I am recommended to other people to help them. So it's about networking, really. And so what was the other component of it?
Bear with me 1 second. Sorry, I have to scroll all the way up.
Oh, sorry, professionalism. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends. What do you mean? What do you think a professional is? Well, I think a professional is somebody that will do an activity to the best of their ability when they least want to do it. And to build up credibility as a professional, you need to be able to admit gaps. And I would trust somebody more as a professional if they admitted to me, look, I don't know, but I'll try and find out, rather than try and blag it and pretend they do, because so actually, I think asking for help as a professional increases your credibility and doesn't decrease your credibility.
Fab, Andy, thank you very much for that. And then Sandy, just a question for you. What do you think it was that stood out with you to enable you to pick the final 6 after 2 years of training? Likewise, what did you see in your 5 teammates that made them the right choice? Because obviously they were.
Gosh, that's quite tough. I tell you, one of the things we did do on the expedition, because we did a lot of psychological training and that side of things as part of research as well, but also to help us get across, is I now reflect a lot more on the things that I do and why I do things and things like that. But actually on this, I had to ask Nix what they were looking for exactly in the team, because, well, Nick said they didn't really know what they were looking for as in skill set wise, because we're all novices. So she focused on a couple of things. The first one was looking for people that never gave up, no matter what. You know, when things get you down or you're struggling, they will just keep plodding on. And I'm definitely a plodder, so that's fine. She was looking for people who put the team ahead of everything else. And for some of us, there were quite difficult decisions to make. Myself and Sophie, as the reservists, we struggled to be able to book work in for our civilian lives, because we didn't know when we'd be on expeditions or whether we'd be part of the team. And we took a gamble. Sophie gave up our house, moved into with her parents, and quit work so that she could focus fully on the expedition. And I was in a very similar situation. I wasn't booking in any expeditions or anything like that, just so that I could focus on this. So I think the dedication to the team before we were even on it certainly helped. And there was yeah, she was looking for just people that put the team first, really, and wouldn't give up. So yeah, we have those qualities, and I like to think that we're nice, easy people to get on with, and we can be flexible with things and just make friends everywhere. So hopefully that's what stood me in good stead.
That's brilliant. Sandy, I've just noticed one more question. Sorry, I hope you don't mind, and it's the last question of the day. So I know you've covered parts of it, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. How much of your training focused on the non-physical aspects of the expedition, such as maintaining your motivation and mindset?
A huge amount of it, actually. A huge amount of it, because when you think of it in physical terms, we're walking for 10 hours a day. Actually, if you've got your body slightly ready for endurance, it's not too difficult, but the mental aspect of it was huge because of the monotony of doing it every day. And if we had fallen out as a team and had a huge problem, then that could have destroyed the team and expedition failed. So yeah, we did a lot of psychological training. We have Army psychologists that joined us and gave us sessions where we had to be brutally honest and put down character traits in front of the other girls as to, you are too much of this, you are not enough of this, or you've got this perfectly right. And then we had to quantify our reasons for those, not just put a piece of paper down. And that sort of level of things is it's really hard to do, and you really have to look inside yourself and start judging yourself and being brutally honest with yourself. So yeah, that side of things, we did a lot of it. We also covered a huge amount of coping strategies. I touched on a couple, but there was a lot more, and each of us picked from the toolbox as to which ones worked best for us.
Wow. Thank you very much. That was one of the best Q&A sessions I've done in quite some time, so that's brilliant. Thank you so much. To all the speakers, you can now turn your cameras off, and we're just going to close up with Lee Vickers from the Future Finest team, if you're there, Lee.
I am, thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Lee Vickers. I work at Handelsbanken and locally, but obviously part of the Future Finest steering group. So yeah, excellent stories there. So thank you first and foremost from everyone at Future Finest to the three speakers, Andy, David and Sandy. I think when the Ice Maiden says that sometimes she has to ask for help and feel like things are getting on top of her, then it happens to everyone. So great themes from me, which kind of openness, honesty, and then just rallying together to get things done. So yeah, fantastic to the speakers. So thank you very much. As Rebecca mentioned at the start, at Future Finest, we want to make these events as successful as possible. So we have put together a short poll of 7 questions, which we're going to pop up on the screen for you in a second. Be really grateful if you could just answer them honestly, just because what we're hoping to do is use the answers just to kind of shape our events going forward, because we want you guys to get the most out of the events. And I know the attendees. Well, there's loads of attendees today, which is great. So we want that kind of every time. So if we could just fire through the quick poll, Laura, if we could get that on the screen. So there's 7 questions here. They are multiple choice, so you can choose as many options as you like. There are 7 questions. So what category event would you like to attend this year? If you've got any preference on what floats your boat or what you like to get involved with. 2, do you prefer more of a passive event like today, where it's kind of educational, so you can sit back and relax, or do you prefer more interactive events where we'll kind of do the networking and such? Obviously, the idea is that throughout the year we're going to have a mixture of the both, but it's just to get an idea of what works well. Times, usually mid-afternoon is not the best time, we seem to believe. However, with over 30 attendees today, maybe we're wrong. So again, what's the best time for you guys? Networking, again, when we're doing it face to face, you usually have a bit of time to go and meet people. A little bit harder virtually, but we've got the knack of doing that. But just how important is that to you? Do you think you can take away anything from today in your day-to-day role? Again, there's loads to go up there, so hopefully you will. And then just 2 bottom ones. Do you work in professional services, and are you currently a member of the Chamber? You can choose more than one, so if you're a Chamber member and you're in Future Finest, which hopefully you are, that would be great.
Fantastic. We're just waiting for those.
Sorry, Laura.
That's all right. We've had nearly everybody's voted now. Just a couple more people just need to vote, and then we'll be ready, and the poll can go off the screen.
Perfect. So just on that, while that's finishing off, the next slide that's going to come up is just a brief reminder of a few of the members' benefits. So hopefully a lot of you guys are members. If you're not, these are the kind of things that you can get from the Chamber. And if you want details on how to become a member at any point, then again, just either stay on, pop something in the chat, or get in touch with us directly. Rebecca mentioned at the start about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great place at the moment to find out everything that we've got going on. So it's got details of our future events, and it's got things that we've got involved with in the past. And so everyone, if you could just search Staffordshire Chambers of Commerce when it gets on the screen, then you'll find out everything from there. And again, that's where Rebecca and Pete's video would come up for this event. So we'll be doing more things like that going forward. If you want to get involved in the steering group, by the way, then again, contact us directly. It'd be great to have other ideas on events that are coming up. So that leads me nicely onto our next event. If I could just go on that one, Laura. So the next event is Don't Panic, which is on the 9th of February. So again, similar kind of style of event to this one, that is, so that we've got 3 fantastic speakers that are going to be talking everything kind of mental health, from things personally to in the workplace. So they've all got kind of a different stance on how to deal with things mentally, especially in the kind of world that we're in at the moment. The world that we find ourselves in can be challenging. But again, it's similar kind of layout to today. So you just be sat at home, relaxing, and just hopefully taking some tips on how to deal with things if every now and again you feel like things are starting to get on top of you, which happens to us all. But again, should be set to be a really good event. So hopefully we will see you all there. And that's everything. So I know we've kind of we're a minute over to past, but I think you'll all agree, hopefully, that the speakers were fantastic today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it as much as we have putting it together. Again, another thank you from everyone at Future Finest for putting the time aside to join us today, and again to the speakers. So by all means, I've got a bit of time. I know there's some people from Future Finest that are still on. If anyone has got any questions that you want to fire at us, then please stick around. If not, then enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll hopefully see you at future events.